If we're going to live a good life, we are going to need two things: vision and power. We need a vision of what a good life is, and we need the power to live it. The problem is we don't always have a clear vision of what a good life is, and even if we get a glimpse of it, we don't often have the power to make that vision a reality. Religion offers both the vision and the power, but it does not serve these things up on a silver platter. We still have to work for them. We have to work to see the vision, for the understanding of what it means to live that good life, and we have to work for the access of that power, to access that higher power that's offered to us. Now, we might think the first one is the easy one, that it's easy to envision a good life and what that looks like. We might think to live a good life, we just love people, love everybody, be nice to people, can't we just all get along? But the devil is in the details. How do we love people? How do we love everyone? What does that look like? Does loving people always mean being nice to them? Can we love others without loving ourselves? And if not, then how do we balance love of self and love of others? How do we set boundaries so that we aren't allowing ourselves to be doormats in our effort to be kind? And we can't be everything to everyone, so how do we choose who to be to whom? And what about all the ways that we harm others without realizing it? The ways we project our own stuff onto others, the ways we unconsciously fight in others the demons that we should be fighting in ourselves, the ways we're trying to be helpful by taking the speck out of our neighbor's eye, but we still have a log in our own. How do you see a log in your own eye? And how do we see things that we are just blind to? Is it like looking at those 3D pictures where you can only see the 3D image if you unfocus your eyes and kind of look beyond the picture? There are times in our moral lives when even if we know that issue is there, it's hard to see. We know it's there, but we can't see it. That's how bias and prejudice work, by the way. They're so hard to change because they can be so hard to see. And what about when we the harm we do to others because of systemic and institutionalized problems? What about when we receive benefits and privileges from unjust systems while others receive less? How do we love people when we are part of the system that's harming them? Does really loving people require us to change the whole system? Yes, but in the meantime, what does it look like to love people in the midst of the injustice? And we struggle with all those questions about how to envision a good life while we're trying to respond lovingly to a moody teenager with an attitude in the morning before we've had our coffee. Or that addicted brother who keeps calling us again in a crisis, or we're struggling in our marriage that's not made any easier by the moody teenager or the addicted brother. And we're doing all that while we're also trying to stop global warming by turning down our thermostats, eating more ethically, and voting for a flawed candidate because the other one is just so awful. So just having a vision of a good life is not easy. Just seeing the vision is hard work. Fortunately, there is a tool available to us, and that tool comes through religious community. Envisioning a good life and maintaining that vision is work best done with others. It's work best accomplished in a community that holds common core values and allows us to work towards shared ideals, a community of people who know us and can help us see those blind spots and hold us accountable for our highest moral aspirations, a community of people with different experiences than we have to help us avoid the trap of believing that everyone sees the world the way we do. That's what religion is at its best. A community that casts a vision of our highest moral ideals and supports us as we try to live up to those ideals. And then we have that other ingredient of a good life, power. The power to do what we believe is good. Having the vision of a good life is only half the battle, because as humans, Even if we have an ideal of what is right, we regularly fail to do it. The Apostle Paul, for all his shortcomings, says it so beautifully in Romans 7, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, that's what I do. I do not do the good that I want, but the evil I don't want, that's what I keep doing. Even if we have all the best intentions when we enter that conversation with that moody teenager, intentions of being kind and listening and understanding and supportive, yet they say that thing that they say, and they say it the way that they say it, that triggers that demon within us that overpowers our best intentions. And we end up becoming our parents in a way that we promised we would never do. Even when we have the vision of what we want, we still need the power to carry it out. And that's the other thing that religion offers us. It offers us spiritual power. It guides us on spiritual paths trodden by so many faithful people throughout history. And it teaches us to remove the obstacles that block the channels of God's power in our lives. I mean, at its best, religion is pointing flashing neon signs to those hidden blocks within us that keep God's power out of our lives. So religion calls us to acknowledge first that we can't do it all ourselves. We need help, we need others, and we need God. It crafts descriptions of God that are helpful. Creator of the universe, spirit of love, light within, redeemer, sustainer, advocate, Christ. All that which is by definition what we are not. Religion invites us to stay in conscious contact with that power, and when we lose contact, not if we lose contact, but when we lose contact, it invites us to keep reestablishing it over and over and over again until we have the habit of reestablishing the contact. Not that we always have it perfectly, but we have a habit of going back to God over and over. Religion lays out moral principles developed by millions of people of faith over thousands of years so we can measure ourselves and see where we need to grow and improve. Religion calls us to confess where we fall short, to acknowledge our failures, to acknowledge the harm that we have done, and to make amends, to set it right. It calls us to share this way of life with others who might benefit from it, to not hide our light under that bushel basket. Removing those things that block us from receiving God's power to live a good life, removing ego, removing pride, and dishonesty and fear. They block us from receiving that power of God, which is the very power we need to live the good life that we want to live. That's religion at its best. Now, religion at its worst happens when we approach it as a tool to build up our own egos instead of setting them aside. When we use it as a source of pride instead of a source of humility, when we use it to nurture our fears instead of facing them faithfully. Some people say, like the metaphor, double-edged sword. I don't think it needs to be a double-edged sword. Religion is simply a knife. It's a knife that can be used to carve us from a block of wood into what God calls us to be. It can shape us and form us, or it can be used as a weapon to keep us where we are and divide us against each other. For that reason, some people choose not to use it at all because they can only see the harm that it can do and has done. But if we refuse it, if we are refusing, we are refusing one of humanity's greatest tools for growth and improvement. We are refusing the tool that has allowed billions of people to live good, kind, loving, just lives through humility and by the power of God. Sometimes I think reading Paul's letters is like looking for gems on a rocky shore. Because there's lots of rocks in Paul's writing, lots of ugly rocks. And, there's some that are interesting and useful and some that are beautiful, especially if you really study them carefully. But if you first look at them, you're like, eh. But if you go a little deeper, it's beautiful. There's those. But then there's some rocks that are just ugly and you pick them up and you throw them back in the sea. That's okay. But sometimes, and to be fair to Paul, on a pretty regular basis, we find these real gems, these beautiful gems on the shore. And for me, one of those gems is in Galatians, the passage we just read, chapter 2, when he says, I have been crucified with Christ. And it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. Christianity is about having faith in the power of the risen Christ who lives within us, so that we can humble ourselves without fear. We can let go and even let die those parts of our ego that are harmful to us and harmful to others. Because we have faith that we can be so much more than the petty, selfish person that we sometimes end up being. We can let go and become something greater and let that greater light shine through us. And of course, like crucifixion, removing those blocks to God's power can be painful. It can be hard. Ask anyone who's quit smoking. But there's a new life and a better life on the other side of every crucifixion. Notice I didn't say on the other side of every grave, but on the other side of humility, on the other side of honesty, on the other side of brokenness. We don't literally get crucified, but there may be significant parts of us that need to die in order that something greater may rise. Someone more loving than me can rise up within me. Some life that is more joyful and more communal may rise. I wonder if any of you can think of any of those parts in your life that need to die so that something greater can rise. If we're going to live a good life, we need those two things: vision and power. We need a vision for what a good life is, and we need the power to live it. If we are willing to work for those, Christianity and Christ offer us both. Amen.